A full-scale war against Ukraine deprives Russia of Soviet-era weapon stockpiles. The huge losses of tanks, armored personnel, carriers and artillery in Ukraine are made up only by reactivating Soviet reserves, writes the British magazine The Economist.
According to most intelligence estimates, after the first 2 years of the war, Russia had lost about 3,000 tanks and 5,000 other armored vehicles. Oryx, a Dutch open-source intelligence site, puts the number of Russian tank losses for which it has either photo or videographic evidence at 3,235, but suggests the actual number is significantly higher. From an article in The Economist.
Experts believe that at the current rate of deterioration, Russian tanks and infantry fighting vehicles in storage will reach a critical point of depletion before the second half of 2025. Most T-72 tanks have been stored without conservation since the early 90s and are probably in very poor condition.
But for all the talk of Russia having become a war economy, with some 8% of its GDP devoted to military spending, it is able to replace its staggering losses of tanks, armored infantry vehicles and artillery only by drawing out of storage and refurbishing stocks built up in the Soviet era. Huge though these stocks are, they are not infinite. From an article in The Economist.
According to experts, Russia is looking for Soviet weapons in various countries, including Africa. Moscow is buying back previously sold equipment and weapons. The most combat-ready pieces of armored vehicles and artillery are immediately sent to the front. Moscow also turned to Belarus for help. The aircraft repair plant in Baranovichi, Belarus, is doing major repairs and modifications to the Mi-8 and Mi-17 helicopters. Information about this was found at the Center of National Resistance, having gained access to the mail of one of the Belarusian engineers of the military-industrial complex.
Технологии. Очень важно.
For the Russian military industry, the technologies that they receive through Lukashenko, not only from Western countries, but also from China, Iran and India, are very important. Let's take the Integral enterprise, which produces microcircuits. Before the war it was a dying, lagging enterprise, but now it works in 3 shifts, from start to finish. On the Depleting enterprise, which produces high-tech commanders, sights for tanks. All this is what Lukashenko is doing today for Putin. Some die at war, and some make profits of it. Everyone already knows that Lukashenko makes a fortune from blood with extraordinary ease.
In addition, the plant in Baranovichi, together with the Russians, is developing a light multi-purpose aircraft LMS-192. At the same time, it is planned to increase Belarus' contribution to this project to 50% of total funding. Representatives of the Russian military-industrial complex are already complaining about the impossibility of purchasing machines made in the UK, reports the Center of National Resistance. This is due to the sanctions imposed on both Russia and Belarus.
Около 100 предприятий.
About 100 military industry enterprises in Belarus today work for Russian aggression. More than 1,800 different components and weapons that are currently supplied to Russia, including components for the Grad system. Today it is critically important in the context of discussing the globalization of sanctions that EU countries tighten criminal and financial liability for citizens of Western countries who violate sanctions policies.
Canada has imposed additional sanctions against the Russian military-industrial complex and entities involved in sanctions evasion that facilitate Russia's access to sanctioned goods. According to Canadian Foreign Minister Melanie Joly, the sanctions also apply to Russian military-industrial complex enterprises that supply key technologies and electrical components to support Russia's military efforts. In addition, sanctions target entities involved in sanctions evasion that facilitate Moscow's access to sanctioned goods or oil revenues sought at prices above G7 price caps. Reported by Diana Kolesnik, Victoria Smirnova, UATV News.